My name is Nicholas Steele. I am the founder of Lyofresh Technologies. Lyofresh is developing efficient and affordable freeze-drying technology to reduce the barriers of freeze-drying and to increase the adoption of freeze-drying as an option for preserving, amongst other things, food. I started this company about 3 years ago working out of my garage. Grew up just loving cooking and expanded that love of cooking in different directions and experimenting with food and understanding the science behind food. My next frontier for cooking was something called freeze drying. So I started wanting to buy a freeze dryer and I couldn't afford it because they were very expensive, and eventually ended up starting to make one in my garage, and then eventually started looking at how I can make it better and how could I make it affect not just me but many more people than that.
I never thought that I'd get into food processing technologies until I met Nick and discovered that it's actually quite interesting to be able to include technology into agriculture and manipulating food, and there's all these different ways that technology's been applied to cooking foods and then discovering new ways of doing it, and started getting involved in the project, and here I am today.
In 2015 I took a course in Thailand where we were living in people's homes. I saw a link between their challenges in preserving food, or the lack of the ability to preserve food because there was no infrastructure, and so they had this amount of waste that was kind of systematic at the small farm level in these really remote areas. And I had a moment where I said, well, why don't I just take the technology I have in my garage that can preserve food, and if I can make it affordable and scalable enough, how can I scale that to actually implement it into those places where I'm visiting, which had all of these challenges with food security? And that kind of has been the main motivator for my company, is that how can we take a technology that does one thing and apply it in a way that actually has impact in the places that we ignore a lot of the time. And once I started looking at food security more in depth, I got in touch with the UN, which then put me in touch with a local initiative in Toronto. And over time, I was going into these meetings saying, hey, I have a solution. And at first, people were skeptical. People generally don't understand what freeze drying is. They think it's either astronaut food, or they don't see themselves ever eating this type of food, but in fact, every one of us eats it every day. Freeze drying is a process where we're just manipulating the properties of food, and that's a combination of pressure and temperature and time, and we're basically forcing water to go from solid to vapor. Instant coffee is freeze-dried food. In your breakfast cereal, whenever you have fruit flakes, that's freeze-dried fruits. It's in all of the baby formula that we buy. So these are things that exist right now, but are very expensive to produce.
Freeze drying itself hasn't changed in about 80 years. They've been doing the same thing and the same approach because it's been the most effective and the best way that they can do it thus far.
The problem with freeze dryers is that they cost so much money and they're so inefficient that you need a lot of resources just to get off the ground.
But our technology stands to disrupt that by being more effective and more efficient than those technologies.
By making it more affordable and more efficient, then maybe we can scale it to places where people don't use freeze dryers right now. For example, at the farm or in kitchens. We're in talks with a grocery store right now, one of the largest retailer chains in Canada, on how they could implement freeze-drying technology as a means to reduce food waste.
By introducing the microwave technologies that we're using, we're able to cut that processing time down by 2/3. The technology that's currently being used just won't be able to keep up with that.
And that's how we feel that we can start addressing larger issues than just an incrementally better technology. It's how can we use that to actually have the scale and impact on the larger society. Not only is the food available for people to eat if it's preserved, but it also reduces the greenhouse gases that are emitted from the food wasting in the first place. So we have multiple levels of impact that we believe we can have on the food system and to eradicate global hunger. Our vision long-term is to end hunger, achieve food security, and create a global sustainable food system. We can't ask people to change what they're doing if it costs them more money or if it changes their habits. But by introducing a technology that enables value to be created at different points in the food system, closer to where it's produced, we think that we can have a very large impact on people's ability to eat healthy food and not waste food. And these are all in line with the big challenges we face as a species.